Sarah Chudzinski has a comment. Sarah, if you want to unmute yourself. Sarah, are you there?
Or you can send it to us in the chat.
She's calling into the landline.
Oh, okay.
All right, well, we can circle back to Sarah.
Well, I would like to just make a comment since Mr. Sanford brought up the Learn Everywhere program. So the concern with the Learn Everywhere program is, as you mentioned, that some children don't have parents, with the time and resource and dedication that homeschooling parents are. And so the concern is for those children, and rather than exclude those children, what we're trying to do with my bill is the way that the Learn Everywhere rules were written by the Department of Education, it kind of excluded children who don't have that kind of strength at home. And so my bill was to try to let the public schools fill in for those. So it's halfway between what the Department of Education was expecting parents to do and what the current situation is. I did have one question for Mr. Sanford. Back when you were home educating, it was, I believe, actually a requirement that you check in once a year with the school district, or that you supply some kind of evidence of what you've been doing during the year, and sometime between when you were teaching and now, that requirement was removed. Do you think that's a good thing or not? I'm curious to hear that from everyone.
It's a good question because we were involved in both. The first few years we were home educating, it was a requirement, and then later on it was lifted, and we found that it didn't change what we did. We were still tracking everything, and as I said, this program we had with the principal at the high school was just a personally developed one just between he and us, because I wanted to make sure if our children ever went back into the public school that what they had done in home education would be recognized. So I recognize that lifting those requirements may have made it so that some parents did less, but I doubt it. I think a parent that loves their children are going to do the best no matter what, and some of those requirements were, what's the right word, bureaucratic, that didn't really have a solid reason for them. And so I think any requirements that don't have a real reason behind them should be lifted. So that's my...
So the Department of Education is considering, and seems quite perhaps committed to having a statewide education management system. There have been no information about this other than just talk about having a statewide. So no one knows the details of how this would work. But if we hypothesize, maybe what they intend, I know it's a very high level system. It's not going to track what your child is doing lesson by lesson. But it would perhaps give every parent or every child within the school district and outside the school district description of things that they've mastered. Is this something, when I say, I mean at the course level? I've taken Biology 101. is this, what would you think about homeschoolers being included in this, or it being optional for homeschoolers, or, okay, I have no idea what the DOE intends to do with this, but I do know that this is something they want.
I'm happy to speak to both of those things. In 2012, when the previous standards were changed, it still keeps parents responsible for keeping a reading list, a portfolio, and having some form of evaluation done at the end of the year. And while parents can choose the form of evaluation done at the end of the year, for those who choose a portfolio review, those portfolio reviews are done by teachers who are either licensed through the state of New Hampshire or through a state that has reciprocity licensing, which is most of them. And those are mandatory reporters. Every teacher is a mandatory reporter. So most homeschoolers who are choosing that form of evaluation, their children are being seen by mandatory reporters constantly. And the standards coming from outside of the homeschool, while those may have been lifted, homeschoolers tend to hold themselves to pretty high standards. We aren't doing this because we want to reach someone else's standards, but because we want to reach our own. And while I feel like this, whatever system that would be coming down from the Department of Education would be wonderful to be able to opt into, knowing the homeschoolers that I know, we're happy to have the choice to opt into all of these wonderful, all these different things that are available to us. We're very happy to opt into them and have that choice. But we absolutely would not want to be required to. And I'm speaking for myself, I'm speaking for some homeschoolers that I do know. There might be some homeschoolers who would be happy to be required to. But it's a pretty wonderful thing that we have so many options in the state of New Hampshire, because we can turn to our public schools or our private schools and ask them, hey, are you willing to, let our kids participate in this? And for some private schools, they're even willing. But to answer the Learn Everywhere program, my question about the Learn Everywhere program, what was the bill that you were proposing with that? I didn't see a number attached to it or anything.
Yeah, well, we have changed names many times because of all the problems with the House. So we ended up having to put Senate bills and House bills. But it was originally SB 514. And the purpose, so it's a long, complex story. The DOE brought in a series of rules last fall. And these rules were denied by a thing called JLCAR, which is the commission that I'm on that decides whether rules follow the intent of the legislation that they were supposed to support. And what these Learn Everywhere rules did, the way they wrote them, was that they brought all these wonderful options to parents, which is what we had wanted, but they said that the options would be approved at the State Board of Education level using a form. So a nationwide company could fill out a form, send it to the State Board of Education, they could approve it, and then every high school in the state would have to accept credits from that program.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that is what the JLCARs objected to. They said that was not the intent, to override the school districts and tell them which programs they had to give credit for. Because, as you know now, the school district decides its own credit approvals. So that was the original problem. My bill was designed to fix that. There was another bill from the House that said just get rid of the Learn Everywhere rules, we're done, the districts would just continue on as we're doing now. And the districts do ELOs, and that's that. But you all know about the extended learning opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my bill was trying to be some kind of negotiation between the two, in which the state went ahead and created all these programs and let parents know about them, but the district got to decide whether or not they wanted to provide credit for any particular program. And there are lots of reasons to be concerned about it, but you probably can guess some of them. So that's what the bill is
And
about.
so why, in your opinion, is it important for districts to get to decide as opposed to the state getting to decide across the board what students get credit for?
So the State Board of Education is an appointed board. So it's appointed by the governor. And right now, the Board of Education, well, it tends to be a political group. That's what I tell you. So it's rather partisan. So that's reason number one. And reason number two is that their review of the various programs is quite cursory. It's one thing to approve the Boys and Girls Club of Manchester that you're very familiar with. It's another thing to approve a national program that says, oh, I can go into the state of New Hampshire and I can advertise my programs directly to parents and make a lot of money. And to have those two equated and to be advertising those to parents, I'm a little wary of that. I come from the educational publishing business, and I have seen the nonprofit schools and all the fraud cases against them and so forth. So I'm a little wary of that. That's number two. Number three is that, as we've been discussing, homeschooling parents, of course, provide all that oversight and all that attention and so forth that a lot of parents need to rely on the schools for. So with the ELOs, there's an ELO coordinator who says, this would be a good choice for this student. I want to suggest this to this student and their parents, and if everyone says, yes, let's go ahead with it, then that ELO coordinator, she or he makes sure, checks in with the student, and let's say it's an internship, the ELO is an internship, checks in and makes sure things are going well, acts as the intermediary with the supervisor at work if needed, and guides the student on appropriate dress and all the things that go along with internships. That kind of oversight and interaction would be removed. And it also removes the role of the school in the community. I feel like now more than ever, we need to have this glue that connects our communities, and having the school working with employers and working with nonprofit organizations and the gyms and so forth, in the way that those of you who've had positive experiences with the districts have described, having the school be that glue, that interaction, that focal point of the network is important to our communities. And I think when you remove that and you've got, teachers or you remove something that's really crucial now more than ever.
Hi, may I jump in?
Please.
Hi, my name is Audrey, and I've been homeschooling my son about 3 years. He just started at public middle school in the fall and then we went back to homeschooling after schools went to remote learning. our method of homeschool is to unschool. And that is something where the thought of having any kind of bureaucracy, state mandated rules and regulations coming in, or only a approved list of programs that we can follow or go into, that rubs me the wrong way. And
Could I just say that these are not only an approved list. This is not, the state is not saying you can only take these programs. It's just saying these are options.
Right, and I think as a homeschool community, we know a lot of what our options are and are not given credit for that. As far as this public schools being the glue for the community, I think that's a public school issue, and that's not something that needs necessarily to be a part of this homeschool listening session, because that's a public school approach that you were just mentioning right there. That's making the public schools more the glue of the community. We're lucky in this area, there's a huge community glue, if you will, already, in the Conval district, at least. From what I see, and my son has friends in both public school, private school, some homeschool, that he's met through a variety of different avenues. And I do feel that as his parent, I am quite capable of making choices and decision on materials that I choose. I'm not worried about being approached by a national company and falling for some fraudulent trap. I'm clever enough, aware enough to be able to do that without being told by someone else how to do that. And honestly, so is my son. Part of, we teach our kids to be aware, to question source materials, everything that it seems, a lot of what they would learn either in school